right. Terry Balisky,
Hello.
where did you grow up?
Grew up on a farm west of Sexsmith on the Emerson Trail.
How old are you?
I am now 80 years old.
Wow. Did you go to school out in that area?
I went to school to grade 6 in a one-room school with 9 grades. And in grade 6, we were bused to Sexsmith, which was the best day in my life up till then.
Oh?
So glad to get into a big school.
Oh, you were?
Very much so.
Nice. And so you went to high school, you finished grade 12.
Then I went through high school in Sexsmith, finished grade 12, and then took a year off, went to visit an uncle in Sacramento, California, and worked with him on a building he was a building contractor until January, and then was going to go to university, but realized I need higher grades in some of my subjects. So I went to Alberta College for 6 months and raised my grade average so I could be accepted into university.
Okay. And then you did go to university after that, or where did you
Then
go?
I decided, with the persuasion of my parents, rather than go right to university, I should go to Bible school. So I went to Bible school in Calgary, Berean Bible College. It's a 3 and 4 year course. I decided to go for 1 year. And that changed the course of my life, going to Bible school. I had certainly intended to go to university, but part of the course was the instructor told us, write out what your goals and what you think the Lord is leading you into. Pray about it, and don't do it quickly, and see what comes of it. Well, during that time, I realized, the Lord was really calling me to go farming. And when I came back from Bible college, I went farming with my brother, who had bought my dad's farm out on the Emerson Trail.
What year was that then?
That was in 1964.
Wow. And that was grain farming?
Grain farming.
Okay.
He had cattle, but I wasn't much for cattle, so we then took out homestead land and bought land out across the Smoky River by the Goodwin Corner, and we moved all the livestock there, and he moved out there, and my wife and I moved into the home place where my dad homesteaded in 1912.
Okay. And I think that homestead is still in the family, right? Your
and
daughter.
That homestead is where my daughter and her husband live, and my son lived there too, but he bought a farm just half a mile south, but he's into livestock, and my daughter and her husband are into grain.
How many children do you have?
We have 4 children, 3 daughters, 1 son. 1 daughter lives right here in town with us. Her husband is an engineer, and 1 daughter lives near Osoyoos. She's married to a rancher, and Lynn is on the farm with her husband, and Todd and his wife are on farm ranching.
Okay. How long did you farm for then?
Farm started in 64 and retired in 2007, which was about 42 years.
Wow. And so was it exclusively farming during that time, or was there other things that you ventured into?
No, we did several things. In 73, we bought the John Deere dealership in Grand Prairie and ran it till it's still running. Expanded it from 1 store to 10 stores. We're in the fertilizer business, introduced anhydrous ammonia to the Peace Country, which the grain companies wouldn't do. They said It's too cold up here to use anhydrous ammonia, but we tried it and it worked great, so we expanded it. And
What year was that then? What year
that was in 75.
75, okay.
And then in 87, we bought a lumberyard truss plant. And the reason for the fertilizer and the truss plant was that we had two brothers that were coming home from missionary work after 30 years. And they needed jobs, and they were ambitious, and we thought we could trust them to run businesses. And and they could, but unfortunately the one brother that was going to run the truss plant lumberyard, when we were building a new complex, he suffered a heart attack and died.
Wow.
So that was a sad time for us.
Yeah.
But we managed to carry on, and a nephew took over and ran it well for us.
What became of the truss plant eventually?
In 1994, we sold the truss plant to Nelson Homes, and they expanded it. My nephew he bought a truss plant in Abbotsford and worked that for a number of years, and eventually now sold that and lives in Los Angeles area.
Okay. And the fertilizer company, what happened with
The
that one?
fertilizer company, we ran it till 82, and we built from the original. We turned around and built a brand new plant, modern, and before we finished it, a realtor came to us and said he had a guy that really wanted to buy that fertilizer plant from us. So we decided to sell it, the three brothers, but the brother that ran it wasn't particularly interested in selling it. But we would meet every Monday before the week started and have a little time. We'd get all on the same, we called it a brotherhood prayer meeting, but we had a Bible study and a prayer meeting. And the Monday that we were to give notice to this realtor, we didn't know what Ralph, the brother who ran the business, would say. But he came to the meeting and he said, "You know, guys, I decided we're going to sell." He said, "The Lord just gave me a verse this morning in my devotions that don't worry about the future. I have a plan for you, a good plan." And he said, "I'm trusting that the Lord has a plan for me."
And you were telling me before that when you sold that, you needed the money for...
we went into land development, and one of the things that we learned in land development, don't go into businesses that you know nothing about. We didn't know anything about land development, but we soon learned that it's a very expensive business to get into. We developed 60 acres into lots and streets, paved streets, water and sewer, and it cost about $2.5 million, and we had to borrow most of that. And then the National Energy Plan hit in 1979 and 80, and nobody was buying lots, nobody was building, and we had a big debt. So when we decided to sell, we said, "Lord, we want $2 million for this business." We had no debt in the fertilizer, and if the guy will pay us the money, we'll sell. It was enough to pay off the bank.
Wow.
And that's what happened. We decided to sell. We got the money, paid off the bank, and 6 months, the one downer maybe we thought was the guy that bought it wanted Ralph to stay on and run the business for him. And Ralph stayed on that winter. We sold in the fall. And in May of the next spring, Ralph suffered a heart attack and never did work again. As you know, took him a long time to recover.
Mm-hmm.
He had other complications, and so the Lord had a plan for him.
Right.
And he worked in the John Deere dealership with us, not so much just as a customer relations person more than anything else.
And that's another business that you had was Prairie Coast, right?
Prairie Coast was the John Deere business
And so when did you start that one?
in 1973.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, John Deere had they owned a retail store, which they wanted to get out of the retail business. They wanted to be strictly in the wholesale. So the guy that was running it was a John Deere employee, and we got to know him as he was much the same age as we were. And through young people's in McLaurin Baptist Church, he came to our church, and we became friends. And he said, "Hey, you guys, why don't you buy this John Deere store? You're farming. Yeah, you buy a lot of John Deere equipment." Well, we didn't know how we could afford to buy it. Both Bob and I enjoyed farming, but we had a brother, Dan, who was in the electrical business, and he was a partner in this electrical business. And we said, "Dan, would you consider coming running John Deere for us?" And he, after some persuasion, he decided, yeah, he'd come. We put the money up from the farm, and he got into it. He became a third partner, but with very little money in it, which we're happy because he was going to manage it for us.
Yeah.
And that's he managed it till the early 90s, and then our nephew took over, Dennis Landis, and carried it through and expanded it from 1 store to 10 stores, and did very well.
10 dealerships, right?
10 dealerships.
Yeah. And I think
all of BC.
You guys were quite you did well within John Deere. You were a star kind of dealership, right?
Thankfully, we were blessed to be one of their top dealers many years. They have a group called the President's Club, and I think I was asking Dennis, how many years were you in the President's Club? It's 5 dealers that become the President's Club in Canada, and I think out of the years that we were in it, he was at least 10 years.
Okay.
And that's not out of sales volume, but like I was saying, Scott, it covers your part sales, your impact of John Deere equipment into the area. John Deere wants 50% of all the farm equipment sold in an area, in a trade area, and we had a trade area that had to be John Deere or else you wouldn't qualify. You have to be profitable, and you have to provide part service that was exceptional.
Okay.
Because what happened, the John Deere said, the car dealerships gave away their parts business to Nampa, to a lot of these smaller companies. Said, we want to keep parts, John Deere parts, original, so farmers don't go off and buy from someone else. And they really pushed doing a good job of selling parts, having them on stock and having them price competitive.
Okay. Just want your opinion. I think you've done quite well in business. What are some of the keys to being successful in business?
Well, I think one of the first things you have to be is honest.
Yes.
If you aren't honest, you won't stay in business long. You want to give good service. You service, honest, and integrity.
Yeah.
Is an important factor. It isn't always making the big bucks. Sometimes there were times when we knew we were losing money on it, but for reasons only we would come up with, We'd give special deals to farmers. Sometimes we knew they needed it.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big things. But I think honesty, integrity, and doing a good job.
Nice. So you farmed from, that was 64?
You know, we started farming. We bought my dad's farm. One of the things that really helped Bob and I, my brother's name was Bob, he was 2 years old. When Dad sold us the farm, he had 7 quarters of land.
Yeah.
He sold it to us on time. He said, I don't want all the money, but I'll give you the titles to all the 7 quarters. And if you want to expand the farm, you can take those titles. He didn't owe any money. And you can take those farms and use them as collateral to expand.
Nice.
And that's basically how we expanded and bought John Deere.
Okay.
And then the Lord really looked after us. I can't say we did it on our own.
Yeah.
We were looked after, so we just praise the Lord.
Tell me about your faith in God. You were raised in the faith?
I was raised, or my parents were both believers, became believers. My dad was somewhat of an agnostic when he came to the country, but through the Mennonite church, he became a believer. And he was so committed. He became a believer in November, and he read that he was a believer and should be baptized. He had the elders chop a hole in the ice and in the creek
baptized.
and baptize him. So
That's a good story.
But both Mom and Dad were very active in the church and were missionaries in the community.
Okay.
There were 10 of us. We had 10. I'm the youngest of 10.
Oh, you're the youngest?
I'm the youngest of
Oh,
10.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. And out of the 10, 6 of my brothers and sisters spent time in the mission field
Yeah.
as missionaries.
Yeah. I know some of them spent decades, right?
Yeah, many
Yeah.
years, yes.
Yeah. Many years. Wow. I wanted to ask you about, like, your wife, Marcy. She has Parkinson's now. Is it a struggle?
Yes.
It's a struggle to live with that, yeah?
She's had it since, I think it was 95 when she was first diagnosed,
Okay.
and dealt with it pretty well. We went many places to try to find cures, down to Mexico, holistic cures and everything.
Yeah.
Nothing seemed to work. We went, were anointed and prayed for. And I think one of the things that we just said, Lord, we have this problem, but we trust you that you are going to look after us. And he has. Until the last 3 years, it's been much more difficult. She's had a lot of pain with it and suffers some dementia. But we're trusting that the Lord will look after us, and he will. We have no doubt about it.
Have you ever doubted God's goodness, ever? Or gotten bitter about
No, I
how much
can't say.
she suffered?
You know, that's one of the things honestly, neither Marcy or I have ever been bitter or ever said, well, why, Lord? I mean, sure, you wonder, why didn't she get healed? But we've never been bitter about it. We've just said, hey, well, if this is the way, you'll look after us. You'll carry us through
Amen.
any of this difficult time that we go through. And he has. And it's not that we haven't had difficult times in our marriage. We were on a holiday in Europe and I suffered a heart attack and had to spend 2.5 months in the hospital in Holland.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it was right in springtime. Mind you, we had retired, so it wasn't that I was responsible for the farm, but I had real peace because we think we have lineups in Canada to get, when I got the heart attack, they kept me alive, but for 4 weeks I was just lying in bed waiting for open heart surgery.
Wow.
There was, they said, well, you weren't as bad as some, and you keep getting pushed off.
Wow.
But
Wow.
we managed.
I want to give you the opportunity, if you can, just kind of like an open mic. If you wanted to speak to people who may be suffering and questioning God's goodness, what would you say to them? Some sort of encouragement or?
I think one of the things, this is not a perfect world.
Yeah.
This is not, God didn't bring us into the world. It's a fallen world. And for those of you who really suffer and question God, remember that this is not our final home. Heaven is the final home, and just praise God that you have someone you can talk to. He listens, he cares, he understands your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And leave it at that, and don't get too sweaty palms over, this isn't happening, this isn't going right. We aren't in a final holding place.
Mm-hmm.
Heaven is.
Right. I want to give you another opportunity. When you look at young people today in our country, what would you say to them? Would you encourage them in any way, or is there a criticism that you might give, or anything? Just
I don't see any criticism, but I see you have temptations, as we all did. I had temptations, but I think the internet has brought tremendous temptations. Try to stay pure. They're so easy to get on to these channels that do not add to your faith, do not add anything to you. They pollute your mind.
Yeah.
Try to keep away from pollution, because a polluted water takes a lot of cleaning up,
Yeah.
and it only makes it worse. So my idea is trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding.
Yeah.
In all his ways, acknowledge him, and he'll direct you whatever way you want to go.
What do you think of our country, Canada, where it's headed in the current state of affairs? What would you?
Well, I think, we have to pray for our leaders. They're under tremendous pressure. Some of them are not leading us in the way that God would want us to go. I think this new reset business they talk about, reset the whole economy, that's not a good thing. I strongly believe in free enterprise. Let people do. They'll make it work. Give them an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Our leaders need to be prayed for. And I think we could criticize less and pray more for them.
I wanted to tell you, before I started this interview, or before I wrote up the questions for the interview, I was praying, and I felt like the Lord spoke to me, Terry, and this is what he said to me. He told me to tell you this. He said, tell Terry that I love him, and I'm proud of what he has accomplished in life. That's what God said.
Well, that's pretty moving. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that, and I do trust in the Lord, and that's all I can say. We can just trust in the Lord with all our heart.
I meant to ask this question first, but your full name. What's your full name? Would you say it?
Terrance Niles Balisky.
And your age? 80.
I'm 80.
Okay. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, good years. 80 good years.
Amen.
Thankful that hope I have a few more, but
Right.
we never know.
Right?
So thank you, Scott, for doing this interview. Bless you.
I am blessed. Thank you.
Okay.
That's good. That's a wrap.